There's a certain kind of person who still remembers the exact weight of a VHS tape in their hand, and the quiet ritual of sliding it back into its case, making sure it was rewound before that trip to the rental store. That same person also remembers the week they downloaded their first MP3, not streaming it, not pulling it from a cloud, but watching a progress bar crawl across a screen, wondering if the file would actually finish before someone picked up the phone downstairs. If you can feel both of those memories in your bones, then you belong to a group that doesn't quite fit the usual boxes. Not fully Gen X, not quite millennial. You landed in a strange, brief, and historically loud pocket of time. If you were born somewhere between 1976 and 1985, researchers have had a difficult time labeling you. The standard generational spans just couldn't hold what you lived through. In 2014, sociologist Sarah Stanorb gave this group a name: Xennials. Others call you the Oregon Trail generation, after that pixelated game so many of you played in school computer labs, maneuvering a covered wagon across rough rivers with limited supplies, constantly making decisions in conditions that changed without warning. That metaphor is sharper than it first appears. You didn't just play that game. In a lot of ways, you've been living it ever since. Here's what makes this slice of time so strange. Most generations stretch across 15, maybe 20 years. Xennials span less than a decade. It's not a generation in the traditional sense, it's a moment. A very specific hinge. And what happened inside that hinge left a mark that broader labels simply can't explain. It's not about being special in some superior way. It's about when everything happened and what your brain was busy doing while it did. Let's rewind, no pun intended, to a world that younger people can only imagine. Before the internet saturated daily life, you lived in a kind of analog gravity. You passed notes in class on folded scraps of paper, folded with real intention, corners tucked precisely. That note could be intercepted, read aloud, become a whole scandal. You made plans to meet someone at a specific street corner at a specific time, and then you just went there and waited. No way to check if they were running late. No here text. You either showed up or you didn't, and people remembered which one you were. If you missed a TV episode, that story was simply gone. You'd lean against a locker the next morning and ask a friend to recount every scene, and then you'd spend the rest of the week reconstructing it in your head, filling in all the gaps with your own imagination. And your mistakes, that fight at a party, that humiliating thing you said in front of the wrong person, that entire phase in 9th grade where you wore that one jacket every single day they faded. No one archived them. No one screenshotted them. They lived in a few people's memories and, over time, softened into something less sharp. Human memory is designed for exactly this: to let things shift, to keep what still matters, to gently release what doesn't. Growing up in a world that allowed that process meant your childhood could become a story, not a permanent digital record you had to live inside forever. And then, right as you were stepping into your late teens and early 20s, the entire operating system of daily life changed. Not gradually, practically overnight. Email arrived, then mobile phones that weren't bolted to cars, then MySpace, instant messengers, broadband connections that didn't scream at you while connecting. Within a handful of years, the world you had grown up in essentially stopped existing, and a completely new one materialized in its place, one where being unreachable became unimaginable. Now here's the part that scientists have actually studied. Research in Nature Neuroscience found that the region of the brain responsible for learning new systems keeps developing until around age 25. You hit the entire digital revolution inside that window, old enough to have vivid, deeply rooted memories of a pre-digital life, young enough that your brain was still genuinely open to absorbing what replaced it. Gen Xers had to learn the internet the way an adult learns a second language, functional, sometimes impressively fluent, but never quite effortless. Younger millennials and Gen Z grew up inside it. For them, the internet isn't a tool they picked up. It's the water they swim in, invisible and everywhere. You're the only group who holds both. You remember what it felt like to leave the house and be genuinely unreachable for hours, to be fully, entirely, beautifully gone. And you also move through 17 different messaging platforms without breaking a sweat. Not because you're exceptional, but because the door was open at exactly the right moment, and then it quietly closed behind you. But there's another layer to this that rarely gets spoken about. You entered the job market right around the dot-com bust in the early 2000s. First real jobs, first apartments, the first real attempt to build something that looked like an adult life, and the floor dropped away almost immediately. You rebuilt, carefully, methodically, and just as you were reaching your most stable years, 2008 happened. Economists call this a scaring effect. Financial instability during your early career leaves a trace that doesn't disappear when conditions improve. You can see it in small, quiet decisions. The emergency fund that never feels quite large enough. The backup plan you build even when there's no rational reason to need one. The slight hesitation before committing to something permanent, even when everything looks absolutely fine. That's not anxiety. It's closer to muscle memory. Your body remembering something your mind has already moved past. If you've ever noticed that pattern in yourself and couldn't figure out where it came from, now you know. There's something else worth pausing on. Not all of this is a clean, heroic strength. In workplaces, in families, in social groups, you often end up as the natural translator. The person standing between older colleagues who want process and hierarchy, and younger ones who want speed and flat structures. Between the generation that gets nervous around new technology and the generation that's never known anything else. That position looks like a valuable asset, and in many ways it is. But being the one who bridges every gap means constantly absorbing the friction between two sides, making communication flow, smoothing things over, translating not just words, but entirely different worldviews, often without anyone asking what that costs you. Psychologists call this emotional labor. And people who carry it habitually tend to stop noticing they're doing it. It stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like just how things are, which makes it very, very easy to miss how much it's actually taking from you. If you've spent years being the reliable one, the steady one, and felt a tiredness underneath that you couldn't quite locate a quiet ambient exhaustion that's not a personality flaw. That's what it costs to hold things together for a long time without ever putting them down. So come back to that VHS tape for a moment. The person who rewound it before returning it, and then, a few years later, figured out how to download MP3s, didn't do that because they were uniquely adaptable. They did it because they had no other choice. The world changed, and they changed with it, without big drama, without losing the version of themselves that existed before. That's quieter than it sounds, and rarer than most people realize. You watched one world end. Not with a formal announcement, not with a clean before and after line, just slowly, in small everyday disappearances, then all at once, the way things change when you're not looking directly. And then you watched another world begin. Old enough to know what was being left behind, young enough to move into what came next without getting stuck at the border, nostalgic to the point of paralysis. Most people get one world. A single coherent context. You got the seam. The exact place where one version of human life was stitched into a completely different one. And you learned, not through any lesson, but simply by living, that who you are doesn't have to be determined by the world you started in. In a time when the ground keeps shifting for everyone, when the pace of change has gone from shocking to daily, the people who've already practiced landing on their feet when everything moved, without losing track of where they came from, carry something that can't really be taught. It can only be lived through. And if that sounds familiar, if you feel that quiet recognition settling in your chest right now, you know exactly which group you belong to.